Hello and welcome to KnuckleSandwich MMA. We had a great card last night. It was a lot of people that weren't so very well known, a lot of fighters, some last minute replacements, but nonetheless, it was a great card, great fights, and we're going to go over some of them with you. I'm going to talk about some winners and losers, and this time I'm going to go over the entire card because there were some great fights on the prelims, and it was just a really good night of fights. Okay, so first off, I want to start off with the first fight of the night, and that was Zalal versus Barrett. Now, Barrett was a last-minute replacement who took this fight, and it was a great opportunity for him because he was making his UFC debut. So he stepped in and pretty much got handed to him. But at least he's in the UFC now. So there you go. Most of these fighters, they're trying to get to the UFC. And if the UFC calls, you know, you got to say yes if you want to be in the best of the best, right? But he was game. He didn't seem afraid. He was a little stiff at first. He tried a little hard at the very beginning, but overall, Zalal, that kid is pretty smooth. He moves very nicely. Barrett was chasing him around the ring quite a bit, and it couldn't corner him. That's something, but he's going to learn from this fight. Which is, you know, that's also a very good positive. So he got two advantages out of this. Okay, first, he's in the UFC now, so that's pretty cool. And second, he fought a fighter that was very elusive, very fluid, and great movement. And so he's going to learn from that as well. I would probably watch that fight, you know, 20 or 30 times just to get his timing down, because he couldn't cage him. He couldn't, you know, block him off or do anything like that. Zalal, but they had really good stats. So I'm going to kind of go over a couple of the stats real quick. Strikes thrown, Zalal 104 and Barrett 89. So that's not bad for some dude that's just filling in a spot. And you know, he's a good fighter. I'm not saying if you're not in the UFC, you're not a good fighter. You know, there's a lot of great fighters out there. But what I'm saying is that's a pretty big stage to make your debut on, you know, especially with all the eyeballs watching, since UFC is one of the few sports events on TV now. So he did pretty good as far as landed. So Zalal landed 59 strikes and Barrett landed 45. So you know, it was a pretty good fight, but ultimately Zalal was very aggressive and he was just like laser. He was landing those shots, even though they weren't super huge shots. He was landing them and hurting Barrett. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. So of course Zalal was a winner on that one, and I do like these stats. They're pretty good stats. And then we have Gavin Tucker versus Justin James. And Justin James came off a really good win his previous fight. So he was riding high. Gavin Tucker was throwing some major bombs at the very beginning of the fight. He was looking to finish this fight. And James was game for a little while, but then Tucker just started getting the advantage of him. And here's the number of strikes thrown. Tucker threw 195 strikes to James 96 strikes. So almost 100 strikes more, pretty much. Significant strikes landed were Tucker 67 and James 34. And James really started to slow down. He seemed to get tired, but it was just a constant pressure. I mean, Tucker just pressed him, and that's really tiring. You know, that's going to tire you out. And let's see what else we have. Any notable numbers? And so basically, Tucker won, and it was. I don't think it was that competitive of a fight. First round was really competitive, but then Tucker just kind of kept his pace and kind of took over the fight and ended up winning the fight. So good job for Tucker. He looked really good. I thought James was going to come in there and win this fight because of his performance on the last fight, but it just wasn't to be. And so good show, Tucker. Way to go, way to go. All right, let's move on. And now we have Andrew Sanchez, and he was fighting a Wellington Thurman, who was a man. That Wellington, he's a big dude, man. I was watching him, and this kid is massive. I mean, his body frame, everything about him, his head, everything was really big. He just looked like a rock solid type of dude. He's a Brazilian fighter. But Andrew Sanchez, who's known as a wrestler, you know, he won one of the Ultimate Fighters. I don't know which one it was, but he won an Ultimate Fighter, and then got into the UFC and has been in the UFC for quite a while. But he's won some and lost some. Yeah, but he's known basically as, and he himself in the post-fight interview last night said, I'm tired of being the boring wrestler. People say I'm boring and this and that. So he's been working on his striking, and wow, going to TriStar. The TriStar gym, they're producing some killers out there, I'm telling you. And so Sanchez is one of them. He's been training with them and working on his striking, and it showed in this fight. Everything he was throwing was landing. I mean, it was just a very, very good showing on Sanchez's part. Thurman, Wellington, he looked really good too, but then the problem was, I think, was Sanchez, whenever he threw, he landed, even if it was a jab. It was a nice stiff jab, but he was hurting Thurman. He was hurting him quite a bit. And then ultimately, he landed a combo that knocked him out, man. I mean, this dude is big. He's a tall guy, and he tipped over like a timber. I mean, it was, he was knocked out before he hit the ground. And with a couple of finishing punches, the refs jumped in and stopped Sanchez from doing any more damage. It was a really, really great fight. Strikes thrown in the fight, not very many, but they were powerful ones. 75 strikes by Sanchez to 69 for Thurman. And significant strikes landed. Look at this. It was pretty close. 12 for Sanchez and 10 for Thurman. Only Sanchez had the better strikes, and they were hard. They were hard. He was hitting hard. His post-fight interview was quite interesting because he said he feels the power, and he's got the power that he didn't think he had. And TriStar apparently is teaching him how to do it. So he looked really good. So I thought that was going to be one of the fights of the night, myself personally. And then we go on to the next one, and this was Happarast Nasrat versus Alex Munoz. And this one, wow, so many strikes thrown in this fight. Incredible amount of strikes thrown in this fight. Happarast, he had thrown 373 strikes in the fight to Munoz's 169. So even though Munoz only had 169, seriously, that's a lot of strikes to throw in a 3-rounder, okay? But 373, you're averaging 100 strikes or more per round. That's crazy. So there's a lot of strikes thrown. Significant strikes landed, dropped quite a bit down, but that's okay because he was busy. So Nasrat had 73 significant strikes that landed. Now here's the big difference right here. Alex Munoz had 10. Okay, so that's the big difference. And it was a great fight. The takedowns, there was one for Munoz. Everything else was pretty much similar. And but Happarast just basically outworked Munoz. And a really good fight. It was a decision, but he's looking good. He's coming off of a loss. Happarast was coming off a loss from, I think it was Drew Dober knocked him out. So good comeback and a great fight. Let's go on to the next one here. This one was a really exciting fight, you guys. This is Kevin Holland versus Joaquin Buckley. And Joaquin Buckley was another last-minute replacement. Pretty much because Kevin Holland was supposed to fight Giles in the last UFC fight night, and Giles fainted on the way out to the octagon, and so they couldn't fight. But Dana White assured Kevin Holland that he would get him another fight, and he booked it on the very next card. So Kevin Holland, his style is really intriguing to me because he's very long, he's versatile, and he thinks on his feet. He looked really relaxed in the octagon, and he talks a lot of smack. He's, and it's interesting because there's no audience and there's no crowd, you can hear them talking, and he was jabbering it up. It was very interesting. But Joaquin Buckley, he wasn't talking back. He wasn't having it. He was trying to, and this was his UFC debut as well. So he was concentrating on getting the win. He wanted to win, and he was throwing some bombs, man, haymakers. He was going out there in the very first round, but Kevin Holland just kept his cool, kept his distance. He was in great striking distance from Buckley. Buckley just couldn't reach him. After the first minute or two of Buckley throwing some big bombs, Holland adjusted and stood just out of reach. And you could see as he was throwing punches, he was about 3 or 4 inches away from Holland in connecting anything. And Holland and the strikes thrown, they were both throwing a significant number of strikes. Holland had 113 and Buckley had 107. So that's pretty close. Significant strikes landed. Here again is the difference: 57 for Holland and 25 for Buckley. But Buckley was game. I think he's going to be really good in the UFC, and so he needs to take this and learn from it because now he's with the big boys. But he will learn from it. And Holland, I've watched some other post-fight interviews and analysis, and they're saying he's a star in the making, and I would agree. I think he's got a great personality. His character, his characteristics are good. He's good on the mic, good on the camera. Even though he's cocky in the octagon, he seems pretty humble on the outside of the cage too. But he's confident, and so I liked his personality. And I like his outlook. He's very, very gregarious, I should say. Also, he did call out Platinum Mike Perry. He wants to fight Mike Perry. So there you go, guys. But Kevin Holland, what a great showing. He's a guy to look out for. So keep an eye on Kevin Holland. And then the next fight we have is Tim Means versus Loreno Staropoli. And Loreno is, I believe he's Argentinian. And Tim Means, Tim the Dirty Bird Means. I mean, this guy, he's, some people say gatekeeper. He's not a gatekeeper type of guy. He wins some and loses some. He wins more than he loses, obviously, but he is a game fighter. He's been around for a long time. He's long, he's lanky, and his punching was pretty good on this fight. He was switching things up with some kicks and stuff because Staropoli is a guy. He does a lot of spinning kicks, back kicks. He does a spinning back fists. So he's really unpredictable. But Means just basically shut him down and ultimately won this fight. But let's go over the significant strikes thrown first and foremost. Tim Means 140 strikes thrown, Staropoli 167. So that tells you this was an exciting fight. A lot of punches thrown, okay, and pretty even. Significant strikes landed: 75 for Tim Means and 58 for Staropoli. And ultimately, Tim Means did win this fight, and it was a really, really good fight, very well matched, and congratulations, Mr. Dirty Bird. All right, let's move on. Let's see what we got here. Okay, this next one was my fight of the night, my favorite fight of the night, and this was Beneil Dariush versus Scott Holtzman. I've always liked Dariush, and he did get knocked out by Edson Barbosa, but he bounced back pretty good because I think he's on a 4-fight winning streak, maybe 5, with this latest victory. Scott Holtzman is a really good fighter, great wrestler. He's strong. That dude is. He's ripped. He looks good, but he's really strong. And Dariush is strong too. He doesn't look as strong because he's not as cut. But man, he can punch, and he was punching hard. They were both going at it the first round, just throwing some big bombs. But Dariush, he got a couple of eye pokes, unintentional. It didn't look like anything. He was trying to to do, but that lit a fire under Dariush, man. And he came out and he started throwing some heat. Like, he was throwing some really good strikes and landing. And he wobbled Holtzman at least probably 2 or 3 times. He wobbled him pretty good, and then ultimately got him and knocked him out. And it was a great fight. Benil. Now Scott Holtzman, I think he was ranked. I think he was ranked number 14 or something like that. Dariush was not ranked, but now after this fight, he's going to be ranked, and he needs to get some fighters probably in the top 10, I would imagine. But he's very he missed weight too, so there's that. Okay, Dariush missed weight, and that's the first time I think that he's missed weight in his career. His post-fight interview, he was very embarrassed by it, and said that's not going to happen again, which I believe, because he's pretty professional. And again, that's the first time he's missed weight, and he said the reason why this was fight of the night for me, I almost forgot the biggest thing, the most important thing. He did a spinning back fist, but he caught Holtzman with his forearm and knocked that dude out, man. You could just see him falling, and his eyes were, going upwards. And that was a great and interesting. And in the post-fight interview, Dariush said, I don't know what I was doing. I just, sometimes I get in the moment, and I just do things. So it wasn't planned, but he landed flush with his forearm across the bridge of the nose and knocked Holtzman out. And that was a great finish, highlight finish. So it's going to be really hard to beat that one for his highlight reel. So well done, Dariush. All right, the next one. So we have the ladies up next. We have Yana Kinekskaya versus Julia Stoliarenko, Stoliarenko, something like that. Okay. This one was, how should I put it? It was an interesting fight, but it was mainly a clinch fight. Okay, so Yana had Julia up against the fence for the majority of the fight, but she was throwing strikes, knees, elbows, punches, and held her down and held her there. So she controlled. Out of 15 minutes, she probably literally controlled her. I would say at least 12 minutes or more of that fight. So it wasn't super exciting, but she did what she had to do. So, and she threw a heck of a lot more strikes. And, they're counting, knees. She did have some good knees to the midsection. Kinekskaya keeping Julia up against the cage, and she was dropping knees on the midsection and doing some work there. So the total strikes thrown for Kinekskaya was 244, and Stoliarenko was 46. That's significant. So Kunitskaya basically threw 200 more strikes in the whole fight. So that's a lot. You can't, that's something you just can't. Oh, significant strikes landed, 157 for Kunitskaya and 4 for Stoliarenko. So there you go. That's the tail of the tape on that fight. But I want to tell you one thing, though, that was really interesting. When Stoliarenko went to the ground, she almost got her in the arm bar, and that was close. So the round was ending, but Stoliarenko's definitely got a ground game that you have to pay attention to. So even though it was one-sided, Kunitskaya knew to keep it on the feet, because she knew if she went to the ground for much of that fight, it was going to be over for her, because Stoliarenko was just really got some good jiu-jitsu. So she's somebody to look out for, even though she didn't seem that impressive in this fight. I think she's somebody to look out for in the women's division. And then we have Maki Pitolo versus Darren Stewart. Now, I picked Pitolo in my previous show to win, and he got choked out. It was a great fight. They were throwing some bombs. Both of those guys are big guys. Darren Stewart was pretty yoked, and it was a great fight overall. But then Pitolo went for a double leg takedown or single leg, one of those, and he took him down. But Stewart wrapped him up and then put a choke on him, and he cinched that thing up tight, and Patullo had no choice but to tap, and so he lost by a choke and guillotine, and that was a really good fight. But the first few minutes of that fight was very exciting because they were throwing some big bombs. Patullo's got some good movement, and I think he was winning in the striking, but Darren Stewart, man, he cinched that down, and you could tell once he locked that in, it was locked. He wasn't getting out. So strikes thrown were, because it was a very short fight. Strikes thrown were 26 for Patullo and 40 for Stewart. Significant strikes landed, 10 for Patullo and 11 for Stewart. So great fight, super exciting, great finish, and I was wrong. So there you go. Next up, we have Chris Weidman versus Omar Akhmedov. Omari is just a big dude, man. He's very yoked, strong, really, really strong. Chris Weidman was longer, leaner, but still strong. He's a strong guy too. And so this was a great fight. Chris Weidman had to win this fight, okay? He had to, because he's lost, I think, including this fight, he's lost 5 out of 6. And so I think his job was on the line. Most fighters don't get to lose that many times and still be in the UFC. But I think Chris Weidman is liked by the company. And so, but he knew that this was his last one, so he had to win. It was a great fight. It went to the decision. Akhmedov, through strikes thrown, was 110 for Akhmedov and 84 for Chris Weidman. Significant strikes landed, 48 for Akhmedov and 58 for Chris Weidman. So even though he threw less strikes overall, most of them were more significant, and he bloodied up Akhmedov a little bit, but the takedowns, Akhmedov had 7 attempts and Chris Weidman had 12. Now, I was getting a little frustrated watching this fight because Chris kept going, but he really wasn't committing to the takedown. He was just, and part of it was, feints, but when you go past a certain point, it's not a feint, it's a takedown attempt. And but he was never committed to it. And so that's why he had so many and didn't land very many. So total takedowns, Akhmedov had 4 and Chris Weidman had 2. But then Chris was doing a lot of laying and praying on Akhmedov, because when he had him on the ground, he laid on him, and he was dropping some punches, nothing really significant, and a few elbows here and there, nothing super significant, but he laid on him and he held him down. And I think that's what won in the fight, was he just had control. He had more control for more time. So was that one of the best fights? Not in my opinion. Chris, I thought he was going to lose in the first round because he was rocked. But then he came back because, so he has a lot of heart. I'm going to give him that. But he didn't look that great to me. I think he's going to, and he said it in the post-fight interview as well. He just wasn't, that wasn't his best performance. But, now that he's in the win column, it's probably relieved a lot of pressure of actually losing his job. And now he can concentrate on getting better and getting back to the basics. I think when he gets back to his wrestling, that he's going to do a lot better, because he was jumping up and down in weight because he couldn't find a place where he would win. So he figured, if I lose here, then I'm gonna go up, and then he lost at, I think it was at 205, and then went back down again. And it's hard to jump around like that and be consistent in winning. So there you go. So good luck, Chris. And Akhmedov, he's somebody to watch out for. He needs to work on his cardio. He's got a lot of muscle mass, man. And when you carry that kind of muscle, it's really hard to have a good cardio. All right, now we're going to move to the main event. And this was Derek Lewis versus Alexei Olenek. And Olenek is like 44 years old. And that's not to say anything, but he's got like 80 fights, 80 plus fights in his career. So he is a seasoned veteran, and he's a good fighter too. They call him the Constrictor. But Derek Lewis, even though he was like 30 pounds heavier than Olenek, so that was a huge advantage right there. 30 pounds difference at the weigh-in. But Derek Lewis, he was looking sharp. He was very calm. He was very cool and determined. And based on I was watching his preparedness to his camp and some of the videos of him working out, and he put in the work, man. He was looking good, even though he was 30 pounds heavier. He looked slimmer. He looked more fit to me, and his cardio was right there. He didn't seem to tire at all. He was sweating, and Olenek almost had him in a Ezekiel choke, and he was putting some big pressure on Lewis's head and just kind of tucking him into his chest. So Lewis, at a post-fight interview, said he couldn't breathe when he was choking him like that because he was just pressing his face into Olenek's chest, and he just couldn't breathe. But he managed to weather the storm. And there was some good grappling on the ground. And I was pretty impressed with Lewis. I didn't think he had that kind of grappling skill, but he was pretty good because Olenek is a ground guy. Okay. He's starting to strike and he's getting better at striking, but he's a ground guy. That's his bread and butter. And Lewis matched him. They were tussling, rolling, changing positions on the ground. It was pretty cool to watch. But then came out in the second round, and he's like, I'm not going to go to the ground with this guy anymore, after getting that almost smothered. And he came out and he threw some bombs. Holy smokes. And he landed one, knocked Olenek off his feet, and the ground and pound was right there. He didn't waste any time, and he was throwing some huge shots. And the ref had to come in and stop it because at one point you could see Olenek, he was guarding, but then you can see he dropped one hit to the side of his face, and then you can see him kind of go limp. And at that point, the ref jumped in and stopped it and waved it off. Strikes thrown. Now look at this. This is huge. Okay, 36 strikes thrown for Derek Lewis, 2 for Olenek. That's what I told you. He's a ground guy. Significant strikes landed, 31 for Derek Lewis and 1 for Olenek. Okay. Transitions, there are 3 for Olenek. I'm going to give you those because there's not very many other numbers that are significant. Submission attempts for Olenek were 4. So he was outclassed, and hopefully this doesn't discourage him, because I know at one point he was thinking about retirement because he's 44 years old. But he's been winning, and so he keeps fighting. And he looked good. He looked in shape and everything. He was slimmer. He looked in really good shape. But Derek Lewis is the Black Beast, man. He is just too strong, too vicious, and he put the heavyweights on notice that he's coming back. And in his post-fight interview, he said, "I'm going to work. I'm going to go home, be with my family, but then I'm going to work and put in the time because, I'm back. I'm ready." And so I'm excited for that. The Black Beast is back. He looked great. He's looked fantastic. And people say, well, he fought an old man. I don't bring up the age because he's an old man, because that dude's seasoned and he was winning. He's been winning. But Derek Lewis, he meant business. He was concentrating. He said, he's going to concentrate on his weight. He's not going to let his weight get crazy out of control to where it's a really hard weight cut to try to get into fighting shape. He's going to try and maintain that. And he looked good. So hats off to Derek Lewis. Great fight, great card. And I would like to make one little critique, if I may. Okay, guys. The fight analysis with Paul Felder. I think they weren't talking enough about the fight. They kept joking, and they were, and at one point even Felder said, well, let's get back to the fight. We got to talk about these guys. And I was like, wow, So I think they need to pay a little more attention to the fight, because these guys are giving it their all, right? They're doing hard camps. They're putting in the hours. They're sacrificing, and at the very least, show them some props and talk about their fights rather than joking about, some guy losing his shorts, because one guy did lose his shorts. But, okay, that's okay to do that, in my opinion. Yeah, I crack some jokes. That's cool. I don't have a problem with it. But they kind of went on and on and on. And, you know, and I was just like, okay, let's get back to the fight, guys. All right, guys, that's it for my show. Thank you for watching Knuckle Sandwich MMA. Please like and share this video. I'm trying to build. I'm getting better. I want to get to a point where, you know, we're having fun talking about it because there's a lot of analysis. I went the analytical route this time, but I do want to keep it fun and exciting, and I kind of want to talk about it from not an analyst perspective, because I'm not an analyst, but I want to talk about it from a fan perspective, and just, you know, like you talk around the water cooler about anything, you know. So if you're talking to your buddy about UFC fights, you know, that's how I kind of want to do it. So I'm learning, but I'm coming along and trying to do it. So help me out, subscribe, share, and let's see if you know, and if you're interested, send me a message on Facebook, and we'll do a Zoom meeting, and we'll talk about it. It'd be pretty cool to do that too. All right, you guys, we're out of here. Have a great day, and we'll see you for the next fight. Okay, keep punching.